I've been using the Canon R5C over the last 2 weeks on some client projects and personal projects. As a full-time filmmaker, I wanted to see how good this almost 4-year-old hybrid cinema camera actually is, especially because I get a lot of comments on my videos when I do reviews on like the R6 or the R5 and I make complaints about some video features. Everyone tells me to go get a proper cinema camera, and one of the ones that comes up is the R5C. So are all those people's opinions actually good advice, or is it a little bit misguided? That's what I'm gonna find out in this video. So I'm gonna go over my real world experience with this camera and talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like, and what I'd recommend for people looking into this camera. Hi, I'm Bruno Pozo. I'm a commercial filmmaker here in Bend, Oregon, and I make weekly videos on filmmaking technique, gear reviews, and how to make money with your camera. If any of that interests you, hit that like and subscribe. Now, on to the review. Let's start off with what I liked about the camera. I think the ergonomic design and build quality of this camera is amazing. If you've used any of the Canon's mirrorless lineup like the R5 or the R6, you'll be at home with this camera. It has the exact same grip, design, and mostly button and dial layout. However, the big difference on the Canon R5C over most of those other models is the photo and video dial and the internal fan. The internal fan makes the camera a lot thicker and also kind of adds to its rugged design, but it's mainly there to help with the performance of video because unfortunately, Canon has had some issues when it comes to overheating on their video cameras. I'll talk more about the photo video dial later, but the internal fan was a huge upgrade because on my R5 II, I did end up buying the battery fan grip because otherwise the camera would overheat a lot more often. The fact that I don't have to do that with the R5C is a nice bonus, and when I set it to auto, it worked pretty flawlessly and it would only really kick in when it was absolutely needed. So for example, when I was shooting at this restaurant, I was shooting at 8K RAW to test the capabilities of it, and the fan would turn on after maybe 10-20 minutes of continuous shooting, and it wasn't that loud. Now, if you're in a more quiet environment, you might hear the fan, but it never got super loud that it was obnoxious. And so in my use case, it was perfect. Another great thing I liked about this camera is the updated cinema menu. So when you shoot video, you actually get a different operating system than when you're shooting in photo. One of the immediate improvements I liked about the cinema menu is the fact that you don't use shutter speed, you use shutter angle. And so I was able to set it to 180 degrees for natural motion blur. And no matter what frame rate I was shooting in, it would stay at 180 degrees and I would still get the natural motion blur. This makes life so much more convenient than having to constantly adjust your shutter speed when you change your frame rate. On that note, let's talk about the image quality. This is still a hybrid camera, so you do have photos and video capabilities, and both of them are using the same 45 megapixel sensor. So you get incredible image quality as well as impressive video performance on the same camera. The R5C can shoot 4K video up to 60 frames per second oversampled and 120 frames per second with the line skipping. The 4K oversampled video is absolutely stunning, super crisp, super detailed, and even at 4K 120, it does get a little bit soft, but I think the image quality is still very impressive. And for those of you who really want to take it to the next level, this camera does offer 8K RAW video recording internally. This allows you to capture 12-bit video up to 60 frames per second in that 8K resolution, which provides some of the best image quality I've seen. Not only do you get that higher resolution, so you get more detail in your image, you're also getting greater dynamic range than the baked-in HEVC or MP4 files in the camera, and you're able to actually record proxies or sub-recordings alongside your raw video. I love using proxy recording because it makes my editing workflow that much smoother and easier, but sub-recording was something new to me and I pleasantly enjoyed using on this camera. What a sub-recording is it allows you to record the raw video in 8K, but you're actually able to record a 4K MP4 version of the same video in 10-bit. And so you're actually able to have the best of both worlds, something in 12-bit super high resolution, but for more quicker turnarounds, you can still have the full sampled 4K 10-bit video that you can use to edit and actually export immediately. And going back to the menu system, it was very extensive and detailed, so you can truly customize this camera exactly how you need it to work. For example, one of the features I really liked was the fact that you can have false color, zebras, and LUT support internally in the camera. And so I'm able to accurately judge exposure. I'm able to view the final image in its Rec. 709 form while still being able to record it in the log profile. But unfortunately, it does only record in C-Log 3. And coming from the R5 II, where I do have C-Log 2, I did find that to be a bit of a bummer, but more on that later. All right, now let's talk about what I didn't really like about this camera. On that note of C-Log 3, I do find that to be quite a negative. It is the only log profile provided on this camera for MP4 videos. If you shoot raw video, of course, you can transpose that to C-Log 2 in your editing program, although I don't really see much dynamic range improvement when I do that. And so you are getting a little bit less dynamic range, and I do find the C-Log 3 profile to be a lot more contrasty than I like it to be. And so the fact that you're limited to this old, outdated log profile, I do think is a pretty heavy con to this camera, especially when you consider that all the other cinema line cameras from Canon do offer C-Log 2. It's only this one that they hammered down to only have C-Log 3. I do love the fact you can record in 4K 120, but it does come with some drawbacks. Number one, you do not get the ability to have autofocus enabled. And so you're stuck having to manually focus, which can be tough, especially if you're shooting at f2.8. And if you shoot in 4K 120, you are unable to record any audio. That isn't always useful. I know most people don't really use the audio in slow motion, but I do love having that as a backup just in case, because there has been times where I wanted that audio, and the fact that this camera just simply doesn't allow it, I think is kind of a bummer. The next issue I found was the battery life. Now, I did use the LPE6P batteries, which are the updated batteries Canon provided, and apparently it has improved the battery life of this camera. However, I still found it to be a little bit lacking. And part of that is because I do have the battery grip on the R5 II, so I do have the benefit of having two batteries. And so I'm used to having over an hour of continuous recording. And so having subbed that with the R5C was a little bit disappointing. I believe on average I was getting 30 to 45-ish minutes at 4K 24 oversampled. And so it's perfectly fine, but if you do long takes or podcasts or anything like that where you need continuous recording, I do think it's worth getting the battery grip for this camera and definitely using the LPE6P batteries. Or at least you can use a V-mount battery, get a cage for it, and then just plug that in through the USB-C and you'll be set. Another unfortunate drawback of this camera, in my opinion, is the lack of IBIS. Now, it's pretty normal for cinema cameras not to have IBIS, but the fact that this was a hybrid mirrorless camera, I was really hoping it would still have it, especially because I do shoot a lot of handheld video, and having that extra smoothness that the IBIS provides makes handheld shooting so much more easy. Now, you can still use lens image stabilization, so on my 24-105 f4, I paired it with the R5C, and it did a pretty good job of smoothing out any of my handheld motions. But I still found it to be subpar, and maybe that lens isn't the best when it comes to image stabilization. And so I did use the digital image stabilization, which helped a ton. But the only drawback with that is, of course, it's cropping in, so you're losing some resolution. And then that can come at the cost of the field of view that you need. So in interior shots at the restaurant, I found myself having to really back up to capture the scene. Another nitpick I have with this camera is with its photo video dial. And there's two issues with it. Number one, I do find it annoying that the off switch is in the middle of the dial. I have found myself so many times trying to turn off the camera, and instead of going to the middle mode, which is off, I would accidentally press it all the way and I would be switching to photo. The camera starts cycling. It takes kind of a long time to switch between the two operating systems. And then I would have to try to be gently tick it back to off. And that was just kind of an annoying like feature and something I had to get used to, but I couldn't quite get used to it in my 2 weeks with the camera. I wish it was closer to like how the R5II's mode dial is, where you have photo and video on one dial and then on and off on a separate dial. It makes it a lot easier to switch between the different modes as needed. However, switching between photo and video does take some time. So if you are a truly hybrid shooter and you need to have quick access to photos as well as quick access to video, this camera does take a little bit longer than I'd like, and so I can't fully recommend it for people in high-paced environments. And the last thing I'll say about the dial is that when you initially turn on the camera to either photo or video, it does take like 3-ish seconds to fully power on. And so going back to high-paced environments, I do think that this camera will need some getting used to in those environments. And in fact, I'd probably recommend just leaving the camera on, plugged into a V-mount, just so you don't have to constantly turn it off and on and potentially miss what you need to capture. All right, so is this camera worth it for filmmakers in 2025? In my personal experience, having used it in all these projects and using it both in video and photo, I don't think so. And there's a few reasons why I think that. Number one, some of those outdated features I talked about. So C-Log 3, I wish it had C-Log 2. The fact that other cameras I own that are not cinema line have C-Log 2 make it hard for me to go back to C-Log 3. And number two, there are just simply better options that Canon offers now. So for example, we just got the C50 and the R6 Mark III announced, and both of those have C-Log 2, OpenGate, sub and proxy recording, 4K 120 with audio and autofocus enabled. And so going back to a model that's missing all these modern features is something I can't full-heartedly recommend. And look, that's not to say the R5C isn't amazing. I really enjoyed it. I think the image quality is amazing. The performance of the camera is super reliable. But when you have better options now at pretty much seemingly comparable prices, then I wouldn't recommend going for this camera. Now, if you can find a used R5C at a great deal, then it's definitely more than capable. You won't be disappointed by this camera. But if you can swing it, I'd honestly just go either the C50 route, C80 even, or the Canon R6 Mark III, because that one even has a lot of the same exact features of the R5C, but with some of those upgraded features that the R5C is lacking. But what do you think? Is the Canon R5C still worth it for filmmakers in 2025? Let me know in the comment section below and your experience with the camera. If you enjoyed this review, you can check out my review of the Canon R1 here. Thank you so much for watching all the way until the end. I appreciate every single one of you who do, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.